I've urged black professionals to take up the banner and take up the war of redefinition, that as long as we operate within the definitions of Europeans, that we will be subject to their determination of our behavior. I've talked often about European constants. That is, certain European programs that have not changed since we first met the European and which are not intended to change. That the superficial changes that we are now experiencing are only brought into being to maintain the constancies. That we must develop the ability to look beyond the superficial changes and see the constancies being maintained by those changes. We are getting ready to elect an African mayor of this city. But beware, this change is still another version of neocolonialism. Its intention is ultimately to put a black face on white power. You must recognize the intention ultimately for the European is not to give up his power. He may even force integration upon his people. He may even elect our people to offices and so forth. Because in the good old neo-colonialist fashion, these people elected to offices are a means by which the ultimate economic, political, social, and other controls are maintained. So we must not see these changes as substantial and basic changes. I'm not advising you not to vote and not to put our African into office, but let us not be deceived. During this Black History Month, I often advise our people that while it is good and wonderful and fitting to celebrate our heroes and to celebrate great events in our past, we must also use this time to meditate upon the lessons taught by those events and by those heroes. It will do us very little good to build up a pride as a result of looking at these heroes and as a result of looking at our great accomplishments if we truly do not learn the lessons of those events and accomplishments. We must recognize that in a way we are now undergoing a second Reconstruction period. That this is not the first time we have been down this road in America. Those of you, of course, who read Lerone Bennett's Black Power USA are familiar with that fact. I've often noted how Bennett did not finish that book. Of course, he then talked about what? Black mayors, black lieutenant governors, black legislatures, black voting power, black corporate leaders, black men in the Senate, black men in the Congress. And yet, in the 1870s, when Andrew Johnson changed his program, when the Supreme Court changed its program, our people were disenfranchised, and it took us 100 years to get back to the same point that we were at then. Which means then that a people who can give are people who can take. And simply because we may be voting in a black mayor doesn't say that this is going to go on forever and ever. We voted him in before. And because we did not change the basic power relationship between ourselves and the Europeans, we were disenfranchised. In this context, I often warn that we are not protected by laws. We are not protected by courts. We are not protected by presidential mandates. They are but words on paper. Words cannot protect your interests. the law is only as strong as those who enforce it, and the laws that now so-called protect us are written by our enemies and enforced by our enemies. And the day that they decide that they will not enforce them, the law will be null and void, and they will remain neutral on the books. So that the ultimate thing then is not laws, not civil rights laws and rules, not fair housing laws and rules. I've told you again and again that if one day the European has to choose between feeding his child and your child, I don't give a damn what law is on the books. He's going to feed his first. And you may cite laws and rules, but the reality will be the one with the most power is going to be the one that rules under those circumstances. So that the ultimate goal for African people then is not the placing of laws on books, nor even the election of mayors and governors, but ultimately the building of power so that we can prevent those who would wish to destroy us from doing so, regardless of the laws they may write, regardless of the laws they may enforce or not enforce.